Good day and God bless. It is with much excitement that I get to come to you yet again with a bonus installment of Breadcrumbs. Not so long ago, we were privileged to sit with Bishop Orlando A. Wilson, the pastor of the New Antioch Church, where we talked under the umbrella and the theme of hope in your house. Just in case you missed it for the first time, here are a few highlights from that interview. Why do you think it's so hard for the people of God in particular and people in general to just stay in the house?
Well, I think primarily because people like to be in control. And when people don't have control, it's frustrating. And so, one of the things that I love about God is that God shows you so many ways that you don't have the control that you thought you had. And the privilege that he gives us to have self-control, we really don't operate in. That you got to sit tight and wait and work, because waiting is working. Waiting ain't just doing nothing. Never measure God in the middle of your process. God can really only be measured after you come to a completion of what he's doing. Everything that God is doing with you is leading you to something else that God is going to do with you. Even with that text, this woman had oil all the time, but never saw it as valuable, and never saw how it could become something larger than it was.
Old Testament or New Testament?
Old Testament.
Favorite scripture?
Oh, wow. Man, I've got so many. I'm going to say Romans 8.
Your first sermon?
1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 51 and 58. True victory.
Wow, he shared with us so many great words of wisdom and so many gems that even still apply and still have so much power. And with much excitement, we get to have another opportunity to share with him. Here is Hope in Your House, Part 2. Good day and God bless. Welcome to a bonus installment of Breadcrumbs. I am so privileged again to do a part 2 to Hope in Your House. I am sitting again with none other than my mentor, my spiritual father, the bishop of the great New Antioch Church, Bishop Orlando Allen Wilson. It is good to have you here. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your kindness.
Bless you. It's a joy to be able to share with you. And hello to everybody. I pray that all is well with you. And I pray that the Lord is keeping you in this time of challenge and pandemic.
Amen. We can jump right in and ask a few questions. With the first case of COVID, which was February in the U.S. of this year, and being under quarantine and now, or getting the opportunity to step out of quarantine and things started to open back up and give a little sunshine somewhere, and for the cases to kind of skyrocket back up. And now we are in a season where things are kind of shifting back into where they originally started. I guess the question I would start by asking is, describe what this pandemic has been, or what 3 words would you use to describe what this pandemic has been?
Well, I think it's been somewhat challenging, and it's been challenging because it has devastated our sense of normality. And I think anytime you kind of break people's norm, it's almost traumatizing. Because it's a sense of grief and loss. And most folks, when they think about grief, they think about the loss of a loved one. But grief and loss have to do with losing anything. Anything that is unwelcomed in the normality of your life that brings about sudden, unwelcome change can sometimes be a little devastating. And so I would say the pandemic has been challenging, but I also think it's been revelatory. Because I think that what it has done is revealed to us what's really important. It's kind of made us sort of hone in on our priorities. And all the things that we couldn't do because our norm was broken made us appreciate all the things that we do. Things like, gathering, or things like talking to loved ones, or the simple things of family. Ironically, now board games are back, and I use that sort of as a paradigm to help us to even better understand who had time to play board games in 20 and 20? When I came along, board games were hot, and now they're coming back because people are sort of confined to the home. They're confined to the family. They're confined to their space. So let's do this because this seems like fun. And so I think that kind of transfers itself into so many other areas of life. So I think it's been revelatory. I think it's been challenging. And I think also it has, I guess, maybe if I use the word, I would say something about it has exposed, expressed, and motivated us to creativity. I think it's taken us back to a place where we're thinking again. So you're thinking, and I'll say for me, I was pretty settled and satisfied just doing things the way that we do them with church because we had a working regimen. It was working. And there's a scene in the Black Panther where Chadwick Boseman, he's talking to his sister, Shuri, as he's playing the Black Panther, and she says, I've got these new innovative things for you. He said, what is wrong with the old ones? She said, just because it's working doesn't mean it can't be better. And I think that, God is pushing us, and, I've become more creative. Things were working, but it doesn't mean that they can't be better.
Yeah. What do you forecast next as this pandemic shifts into a whole, another almost animal, if you will, another, as it transitions, as the seasons are changing?
Well, I think one of the things that we've learned is that you can't force things. You can't force life. Life has a way of teaching you. A friend of mine said, sometimes we worry too much about people not doing what we want them to do or what we think they should do. He says, life will teach you. Just let life happen for a minute. And I figured out that life will slow you down. It will make you kind of rethink, reorder, restructure, and you can't rush life like you try to rush some things in life. So because of that, I think that even with the pandemic, I think we thought that we had learned the lesson and now we're ready to go.
Yeah.
And life said, not quite yet. And with that, we've had a resurgence. There have been quite a few things that we're still going through and still experiencing. So I think that, the after the pandemic is going to be progressive, it's going to be fluid, and it's going to come in stages. I don't think there's going to be one thing. I think that the church in and of itself will have to adjust. I don't think that we'll ever go back to the way that church was. I think we will go back to some things, and I think we'll have a hybrid sort of presentation of church. And I think that for those who have not adjusted during the pandemic, they will have a very difficult time adjusting after the pandemic. I think also there will be a time of healing that will have to transpire. The church will play an integral role in that healing. We'll have to kind of help people process all of the trauma, hurt, and pain that they have experienced within the pandemic that they have not processed as life lessons yet. So we got to help people get better. I think that in the midst of that, I think the church is going to find itself honing in on reprioritizing what is most important. I think preachers in particular. I've never really been a pop culture preacher, but pop culture preaching became very popular.
Yeah.
I'm what you call an old time, old school Bible preacher. Straight Bible, and hey, I'm proud of it. Hallelujah. But pop culture preaching was more geared towards people's feelings and emotions, which was connected to the time. People are going to change because they're going to figure out, or they're figuring out that that feelings is not going to sustain you for the aftermath of the pandemic because it didn't sustain you in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so churches are going to have to adjust, and preachers who do not adjust will find themselves irrelevant. I think that spiritually, that's the Lord speaking. And I think that what God is saying to us is substance will always outrun that which is unsubstantive.
Yeah.
So I think that, we're going to have to go back to Bible preaching because that's going to be the thing that's going to give people what they need. to be able to sustain themselves. And I think, I'm just going to give you this hot off the press, I think that God is going to reward people who stayed consistent with the word. And I think part of that reward, somebody like me, I consider myself a little bit older now, in that, I used to be one of the young cats like you, who looked at all these old guys like, wow, these guys are old. We'll never get there. Wow. And now I'm becoming one of the patriarchs because, or one of the old sages, because all of the older guys are leaving us. And I'm finding myself in my crowd. We're finding ourselves having conversations about what does it mean now to be the old guys, to be the guys that have to mentor, that have to lead, that have to give credence to, that have to, support and sort of be centered and have to give the advice and the kind of weight that carries with it. And I think that in that this new, what I call Caleb generation, I consider myself part of now the Caleb generation, who is older, but God is going to empower us to feel half our age in order that we might get the promise that many folks thought we had missed. Oh, this crowd, y'all are just too passive. Y'all are just too caring. All of this, okay. It wasn't our time yet. We the Caleb generation. And God is saying to us, it's time for your reward. Yeah. And Caleb said, I feel half my age, but I've got the wisdom of my age. Now give me this mountain.
Give me this mountain.
And so that's going to be my sermon for this generation. Come on, let's go get this mountain and let's cultivate what it is that seems raw, but is pregnant with possibilities.
I want to touch on something that you spoke to earlier, because I know you have an affinity and you are advocate for mental health. What trauma do you see in tomorrow?
Oh, wow. Well, so many things happen at so many levels, politically, socially, racially, spiritually. I mean, I could probably talk about this for the next couple of hours. People have been traumatized politically with the whole Trump era. It has been mind-blowing. Yeah. And it's almost like I was having a conversation with somebody, and I said, we've got people that we can't write off that supported him, that they are almost in a trance. And they have to be deprogrammed as if they were in a cult.
Wow.
And so that's part of the trauma of deprogramming this cultic mindset that came out of a deep-seated sense of their own personal prejudices that they chose over our collective and corporate healing. They'd rather be prejudiced than healed, and he gave them permission to stay sick.
Wow. Wow.
So we got to heal them from that. Can't write them off. You're talking about 70 million people that voted for him. You can't just say, well, we're just going to cut that part of the country off. Right. Those folks have got to be healed. And the people that were traumatized from the things that he did, they got to be healed. So guess what? Everybody got to be healed. Yeah. And we're not even talking about the racial disparity that's part of the prejudice that this country was birthed out of. We're not talking about even yet the spiritual trauma. You know, if I had an opportunity, I would share that we're still in spiritual conflict. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness, wickedness in high places. That's very real. Yeah. People have been traumatized because somewhere along the line in pop culture preaching, we stopped preparing them for spiritual conflict so that they were able to turn around 3 times and say, I'm going to be blessed. But they were not able to fight an invisible adversary because they were not given the tools nor given the priority of overcoming this spiritual conflict. So spiritually, we got to get that kind of together. And then we got to reprioritize for the church to reprioritize God. In this sense, we have a church mindset that was geared towards an unbeliever in meeting their needs without really meeting their needs. So we shaped a church that would invite them, and they said, no, I don't want to come because y'all just like me. And then we were trying to figure out what to do, because what they needed was not to be catered to. What they needed was the freeing message that freed us all. He died.
Yeah.
He rose.
Yeah.
And he's coming back again.
Yeah.
So, I think we got to be healed from that. And then we're not even talking about all the trauma that is within the family from the pandemic, all of the hits that have been taken in relationship to the people who have been traumatized financially. And we're not even going to talk about the powder keg in the room, which is grief and loss.
Yeah.
Grief and loss. Grief and loss. We have a mentally unhealthy culture that has not prioritized mental health. That for the most part is not even sensitive to spiritual center or spiritual health. And when you put all that together, you're talking about trauma. So I just gave you a few snippets. My hands are going to be busy. As a person who's a mental health professional, my God, and a spiritual leader too. The church now is going to have to. I want to say to everybody who is in spiritual leadership, you're going to have to equip leaders in the church to be able to become mental health advocates and encouragers, so that they will be aware of what they're coming in contact with. And if not, your church will be overwhelmed.
What would be a small formula that you would say that people who are in spiritual leadership can use to infuse mental health into how they practice worship, how they gather?
First thing is awareness. If people are not aware of the issue, they won't do the work that is necessary to be sensitized. So for people, for instance, and I'll use this as an example, for people who don't think there's a racism problem, they never address it, nor do they address their own prejudices and or privileges. So until you can acknowledge, hey, this is an issue, and bring about some awareness, people are not going to get better. So one of the best things that any spiritual leader can do is keep people aware. Preachers have to do it, because one of the greatest moments you have of getting any message across is at the preaching moment. If you're a pastor, the greatest preponderance of people is during preaching time. And so preachers are going to have to learn how to infuse some sort of psycho-theological center in their presentation and in their biblical interpretation, so that they can draw the hermeneutic from their homiletical experience, that people can get delivered and at least be aware, hey, man, I didn't think of it like that, So I think that's one way. I think that too, workshops and prep, getting a group of people and saying, hey, in small groups, we have this group of people that are prepared to be able to address these issues. You can't do it all, but do something. And then I would also suggest that there must be some sort of collaboration, that because we can't do it all, we got to collaborate with each other, that maybe we can specialize and share. And then the other thing we got to do is create some sort of bridge with mental health professionals, instead of creating oppositional relationship where you stay over there and we stay over here. When we've got problems that kind of overlap, we got to work together. And as somebody who is from both camps, as a mental health professional and as a spiritual leader, you got to bring that together. So I think those are just some things. And to raise the discussion, I just did a virtual workshop on the mental health of the church. And so after talking to this group of leaders and preachers, they like, oh man, we got to get to work. We got to get to work. And the conversation generated means that at some point action will manifest.
I had an interesting conversation with a few young preachers, and one of the things that I thought was interesting was that a lot of young preachers felt like there was a disservice that was done when it comes to mental health, because the older generation maybe didn't know that the terminology would have been depression, but it was a thing, and they didn't know what to call it. And because they didn't know what to call it, I guess to go back to what you said earlier, and that they felt ill-equipped to handle something like that when it came up, to where now things like suicide and things are exacerbated in our generation because of the lack of acknowledgement or the lack of awareness or the lack of communication?
One of the things that my generation did, and just to kind of take you historically, preachers are much more proficient now because there are much greater opportunities for preachers. So when I came along, there was this big push. Preachers should be prepared. Preachers should be prepared. So of course, my generation became a more prepared generation. I went to school. I stayed in school. You know, I'm an advocate for education. So you know, I did the master's. I did the doctorate. I went back, did another master's. Went back, did another master's. I was traumatized with education. But in that, I was prepared. And we had a group of preachers before us who told us to get prepared because many of them weren't. So they were trying to help us to get where we needed to get by really putting the pressure on us. You need to be prepared. You need to be prepared. Then we had pop culture come in. And these preachers, once again, came along and they were unprepared. Yeah. My crowd said, get prepared, get prepared. And they took it as offense rather than taking it as get prepared. And now they figured out that they could do it. They could jump the crowd, but they couldn't. There were things that they were limited in just because they didn't get prepared. So they were aware of what was out there because now the thing that this younger crowd has that my crowd didn't have is media. Yeah. You got the internet. You got, when I went to school, remember, I had to go to the library. So when I worked on the sermon, I stayed in the library all day working on the sermon because there was no internet. Where today you can push a button and all the stuff that I had to sit in the library for all day, you can have it at your fingertips on multiple screens. And so, that also generated the fact that this crowd maybe didn't feel like they needed to get prepared. So my crowd, after a while, the competitiveness of that and all of that, some crowd just dropped off, or they didn't have the means, or didn't have the opportunity. They didn't know the terminology. And so in the midst of all of that, I think there has to be a collaboration between this generation and my generation, because even so, a lot of guys in my generation didn't get prepared. They just went out, they said, I can do it, and they went out and they kept up with what they thought at the time was just like a way of enculturating themselves. And they could make themselves relevant by being connected to the culture instead of, and this is what we end up going back to, instead of being equipped in what you claim is you or your profession. So I'm not much of an enculturated guy, though I'm aware of culture. But I am a Bible guy. Yeah. I know the words. So I think that there has to be a collaboration. There's guys out there, they don't know the terminology. And then we over-spiritualized. That's the devil. Or, just give it to God. You'll be all right. And sometimes it was because they didn't know. Sometimes it was because they didn't know how to build the bridge. But, now we know better. We got to do better.
What does the collaboration look like to you for the young and the old moving forward as far as or as close as soon as 2021? What would that look like?
I think it's relational. And I prayed in my prayer all the time. I asked God to take these children, youth, young adults, and equip them for the next leg of the journey. The reality is, look, this generation now, some of the smartest we have ever produced as a culture. I mean, they're quick. They process quick. They're like little walking computers. I mean, this generation is like on the edge as far as being able to just snap and do it and make it happen. But my generation and older, we know strategy. We're wise. We know life. And with that, if you have all strength and no strategy, you can go strong, but you can't go long because you can't go far. If you have all strategy and no strength, you got a good plan, but you have no way to implement it. Part of the collaboration is taking the strength and the strategy, matching it together, and coming up with a viable plan that works for the good of the whole. It is not that one is more prominent than the other, but the two necessitate the cooperation of both. And when we do that, we come out with a good thing for our culture, for our people, for the church, for the kingdom. And it's just essential. But everybody's got to know what they're good at. You're not good at both.
Yeah.
You know, my crowd, our strength is not what it was. And the younger crowd, they're smart, but intelligence does not mean wisdom.
That's good.
And so, you know, we need each other, which is the bottom line. We need each other. And until we can do that, our culture will suffer.
How does the digital age, or how has the digital age changed how you function and will function in ministry?
Wow, it has blown my mind. No, with all level of seriousness, you know, I was used to doing church the way we were doing it, and I was happy because it was working. You know, hey, just put me in the pulpit, give me the Bible, let me preach. You know, folks are getting delivered, helped. I wasn't into the digital thing. It just, I didn't want to do the work with it because, you know, I just came from another generation. But I'm telling you, God moves in mysterious ways. He has a very funny sense of humor, and he'll make you do what you hadn't planned to do. Now that I'm doing the digital, I'm trying to figure out how did I get along not doing the digital. So I think that, I'll never be able to go back. And I'm grateful for it. And I think it created a sense of youth for me. It's almost like, oh, okay, well, let me do this all over again. I don't think anybody who can't now, you're going to become irrelevant. You know, like things have changed. Things changed when my generation came along. The crowd before me, if they didn't adjust, they became irrelevant. So the Lord kept me relevant to digitize me against my will, I might add. It took a pandemic, but I'm thankful for the push. Thankful for the push, and grateful for the instruction. I mean, you know, like I know, I was not, I consider myself a smart guy, but I wasn't very smart or savvy when it came to the digital age because I didn't feel like I had to be. But now that I'm learning, and I think that shows great collaboration. You know, your generation has been teaching me about this whole digital piece. And I have the wisdom and the know-how of church. But I didn't have the wisdom and know-how of a digital age. So I had to learn, and I had to be teachable. But then in that, there's collaboration. We exchange. I give the wisdom and the strategy of the kingdom and the strategy of the word, and you know, I got that. But unless I can communicate that, I become irrelevant. So generations, I think we got to write a book together.
I'm with it.
I think that we show people it can work, but there's got to be a sense of, one, everybody knowing their lane, and two, a sense that everybody has something to learn. I'm the teacher, but not about digital. So I'm the student. Y'all tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it, which is what I always say. Y'all tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it. When it comes to other matters in relationship to the word or church, or I've got a level of wisdom and experience with that I can offer some direction and some guidance. And in that, I'm the teacher. One of the things I've learned, you know, I've got an earned doctorate, and the thing that people think is because you have a doctorate, it makes you smart. Not necessarily so. It means that you have become an expert at something, but not an expert at everything. So when you do your doctoral dissertation, you're an expert at what you wrote about. You're not a doctor of the world. You get the title doctor because you became an expert at something and you prove that you were an expert. You go before your panel and they ask you questions about what you are becoming an expert about, and they sort of put the mantle on you and say it's a done deal and you are now Dr. So-and-so. But just because I'm a doctor at what I'm an expert at, I'm not a doctor of medicine. I'm not a doctor of da-da-da-da-da. I'm a doctor of that, not of everything. And I think that kind of mindset helps us to understand we're good at things. We're not good at everything. And maybe that's how God kind of laid it out, so that we would always need each other to collaborate to get an end or an outcome that would take the participation of us all to make the whole blessed. Maybe that's what he's trying to get us to. Maybe that's what Paul meant when he said, though we all different members in the body,
Still one body.
still one body, and we all have different functions, but we need everybody's function to make the body work.
Yeah. You forecasted something years ago. I've been privileged to be under your leadership for some time. But as I watch and navigate how or what have become hot topics and things that are becoming global messages, it was the motto of the church for some time that we were moving from religion to relationship. Relationship has become one of those key things that preachers and doctors and mental health professionals are talking about on a huge scale right now. Why do you think that's going to be so important or has become so important?
Well, I think it's always been important. I think we opted out of the priority of it. And I think this is what the old folks said, you don't miss your water until your well runs dry, which means you don't appreciate relationship until you don't have the freedom to have it the way that you took it for granted. So we took it for granted. We thought we could make it without people. We went into isolationism. It was about me, individualism. And in that, now the pandemic has taught us you need more people than you thought you did. So I think it's always been important. I think we just didn't prioritize it. And I think now we're seeing the need to prioritize what we minimized. And I think now it's going to become essential. I think that life moves at the speed of relationship. I believe it. Relationship with God, relationship with others, relationship with yourself. If any of those at any given moment are out of whack or out of balance, it is going to create an imbalance in your life. Jesus says to us, I have 2 commandments with which you can hang all the rest. He says, love the Lord your God with everything you are. That's relationship between this way. Then he says, and love your neighbor, that's right here, relationship between you and people as you love yourself. That's relationship in here. That's what I live by. Here, here, here.
It's powerful.
So the relationship has always been important, and notice the power of it in relationship to God. He says it is so important that all that he is in understanding his request and requirement of you is based upon here, here, and here. Now, if Jesus can take the over 600 and some odd laws and requirements of God and take everything that we put in the Bible and everything that we interpret and theologically we go back and forth about what is, what should be, what shouldn't be, what can we do, what can't we do. And he says that you can take all of that. Since we can't memorize all that, we still fighting over that, we trying to figure all of this out. I'm going to make it simple for you. Here, here, and in here. And if that's not relationship, then what is? God is most concerned about my relationship with him, with others, and within myself. And I can't have peace within me if I ain't got peace with him, and I can't keep peace with other people.
I got one more question, and then we're going to do rapid fire. And I'm going to ask for your final thoughts and words of encouragement as we move forward and progress into what will always, or is about to be a new year. Go figure. 2020 has gone by really fast.
Gone.
But the last question I guess I would have is that what do you think pastors will grieve the most moving forward?
Oh, there's a lot to grieve. I think as quiet as it's kept, because life shows no partiality. Pastors are grieving now. I think I'm still in grief. I'm in grief. I've lost a lot of friends. Pandemic, a lot of people I know, a lot of people in ministry, a lot of people that I looked toward and even looked up to, who've just gone on. So I think pastors, though they have to minister to others, they still hurt and they still grieve. So I think there's that grief, not to mention their own personal losses. I know pastors who have lost, some of them lost sons and daughters and parents and wives and husbands, and it's just, the loss it's been traumatizing. And oftentimes, pastors keep moving so much that they just keep pressing and pushing past it. The pandemic makes it so they can't. So now they got to sit down and sit with themselves, which causes a whole nother level of challenge. Because pastors can't come to church.
Right.
They can't preach it out by saying, I'm going to preach my way through it. They got to sit at home and contemplate, what does all this mean? And so I think that pastors have their own personal grief. I think they have the grief of the loss of friends, family, loved ones, members. You know, people think that, these strong pastors and preachers and bishops and apostles and all that are just sitting up in the pulpit, and they really have no relationship with the people that they serve. And that's quite the contrary. Pastors try to remain stoic to some extent to be able to get through what they have to get through. But Sister So-and-so, who was always there, who they always looked toward, who always gave them an encouraging word, Pastor, I'm praying for you, and now Sister So-and-so is gone.
Yeah.
Or Brother So-and-so, who looked out for him and came just to sit down with him and just have a little conversation, and gone. Or little so-and-so who was there and they were just gone. And so I think all of that brings about some challenge and loss. I think there'll be some challenge in trying to make the adjustment with what the church was and what the church is going to be, because there's a bit of uncertainty. And I think some of that will pass, because I think the Holy Ghost will give comfort and all, but I think that the process will be challenging. I think pastors will also probably have some challenge about what adjustments they may have to make in their own vocation. Some guys who were just vocational may have to become bivocational. And in many cases may have already done that. They may have to develop a whole nother set of skills, which raises a whole nother issue, and we'll probably have to talk about this in another Breadcrumbs. God has pushed pastors into the marketplace.
Yeah.
Not by choice, but by survival. So, I've been talking about this whole marketplace ministry thing for years, that we better get ready for the translation of it and for the manifestation of it. But now, because churches have sort of declined in their finances, and pastors had to go out here and get a job, another job. So now, they got to be bivocational. They in the marketplace. They not just pastoring the church. Now they passed on the job. Hey, pastor, you all right over there? And now they're in the workspace and the workplace. They have to corporately adjust themselves, and some of them have to go back and hone in on their skills, or gather new skills, or go back and figure out what their skill set is other than the gift of gab. So I think there's a sense of loss in that, and then I think there's a sense of loss personally, because it also makes you question, like, how relevant am I? Who am I? You have to answer all the questions that everybody else has to answer in life. And you have to question now the vitality and the power of all the relationships that you have. These are the same pastors who are ministering to other people, but they still got to go home. They still got to deal with their relationships. They still got to deal with their kids. They still got to figure out how they're going to pay their bills. And if the bills ain't paid, you got to come home and explain what we're going to do next. So you're not just figuring it out for church, you're figuring it out for home. Where am I going to live? What am I going to do? And I think all of these things, along with, the grief that they experience when they go through an experience with every other person that they're trying to help go through the experience that they have, is also a sense of grief. So let me recommend to anybody in spiritual leadership, while you counsel, please get a counselor. And we're going to have to just get out of this piece that, you don't get some sort of therapy. Therapy is healthy. Can I say that again? Therapy is healthy. And it's healthy just to kind of get some things out of you and get another perspective and take another look at it. So that's just a few things. I could probably talk about it for another hour. Because
I know I said one more, but it sparked another thought, and I just think it's powerful to express how has your perspective on how the church sees you and how you see the church changed.
Well, I think that one of the things that the Word says is that friends are found in adversity. I think adversity defines relationships. I'll give you an example. People talk about, oh, I'm so in love. I'm so in love. You don't know how in love you are until trouble comes. When trouble comes, and how you handle and get through the trouble will dictate the kind of love that you have. And so I say that for any relationship. And I think that this pandemic, for me, has helped me to see the people that I serve in a different light, even more so because we've grown closer in the pandemic. We've gotten together, we worked harder, we pressed our way through it, we've stuck together. And so if we look at it like some sort of relational connection, we are more related now than ever before. And that's just my circumstance. I see them as more dependable. I see them as more available. I see them as we gonna make it, we're gonna get through. And I think for me, it has helped me to become more creative, more spontaneous, because you have to. You don't know what's gonna happen next. So all of that contributes to the betterment of the relationship. It contributes to them and their appreciation of me, and it contributes to me and my appreciation of them. I think it is collaborative. You know, I could say, oh, well, I think they appreciate me more, but I think I contribute to that appreciation some because I appreciate them more. And I think that maybe that's what God is trying to get us to once again, to see how much we need each other. You know, I'll give you this last little piece, and hopefully this will help. When you read in the book of Acts, after Jesus had ascended up into heaven, the text says, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, began to make her way back to the upper room because they're trying to figure out now, what are they going to do? Jesus has just ascended up into heaven. He's gone. What does that mean for us? They just got admonished by the angel. Why are you all standing here gazing? And so they make their way back to the upper room. These are all the disciples, what they're going to do now. And out of nowhere, Jesus' mother says, I'm all in. And then the text says, and the disciples said, and we all in too. And then the text says, and the women who followed Jesus, who were with them, said, and we all in too. And the text says, and the brothers of Jesus, which is powerful, because these are the same brothers who really were adversarial to their brother Jesus because of the peace between their mother and their father, of them knowing that Jesus didn't have the same father as them. And the text said, and they declared, and we all in too. It became a collaborative, combustible such situation where all of them say we're all in, because it's basically going to take all of us to make this thing work. And after that, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, and they were all with one accord, then. So there's a sense of togetherness that I think that even the pandemic is teaching us. Happy just to talk to people. Glad to see people. I mean, can you imagine folks used to be, oh, I got to go to church again. No, I'm glad to go to church. I was glad when they said unto me, let's go to the house of the Lord. So now we're happy to see each other. Now we're happy to try to work it out. Now we're happy to try to, what can I do to make life better for you? What can you do to make life better for me? What can we do to make life better for other people? There's a sense of greater appreciation and greater value. And isn't that really what God wanted us to do? To love each other like he loves us. God is always happy to see us, always happy to engage. Now that y'all done had a little trouble, y'all happy to engage too. So I think that kind of gives some insight into hopefully what you're asking me.
Yes. Rapid fire, really quickly. I know the answers to some of these questions, but it'd be good for others to kind of know. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Favorite hymn?
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. Now, I like some other ones too. I like some other ones. It's kind of hard with hymns, but that's the first one that comes to mind. But, I'm a hymn guy.
Yeah.
So
Morning or night person?
probably more morning, because when I get up, I'm up bright and early, no later than 5, between 4:30 and 5. And when I wake up, I'm talking. So I don't have to get myself together. I'm already, and maybe that comes with the job. It's just like if somebody calls me, I got to be like, hey, praise the Lord. So I would say morning. I get tired quick at night.
What TV sitcom family would you have been a part of?
Let's say, I don't know. It's funny to say, I like the Cosbys. I think that probably, I like the Cosbys.
What was the best piece of advice you ever received that you will never forget?
Son, humility will take you a long way. That's what my grandmama told me many, many years ago. Never forgot it. I passed on that message to quite a few. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned. There was an old man that once said to me, son, you're going to have many battles in life. Choose the ones you're going to fight. So I think if 2 lessons came to my mind immediately, those are the 2. But my grandmama, when she told me, son, humility will take you a long way. It'll get you in places that what you have done or prepared for will not.
With that being said, your final thoughts or words of encouragement as we go or push forward to the holiday season?
Well, I pray that everybody would be safe. Hallelujah, be safe. The pandemic is real. And we don't operate in fear, but we do operate in wisdom. And the word teaches us to be as wise as serpents and as humble as doves. So I would say that please be safe and be loving. A lot of people are going through a lot of stuff, and I still believe that love conquers all. And I still believe that that victory is in what God has shown and shed towards us. And this is what the word says. And this is what love is. That Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives one for another. It's not to say that we should give up our lives in that sense, but it is saying sacrifice becomes imperative in the expression of love. And I think that the harder times get and the more challenging things are, it may be a little bit of sacrifice, a little bit of leadway, a little bit of patience, a little bit of understanding, and a lot of humility will take us a long way in expressing the love that God has conveyed to us.
Well, I want to thank you for your time and sharing with us here at Breadcrumbs. How do they find you? How do you express yourself in this digital age where they can reach you, see you, get words of wisdom, hear what you have to say?
Well, of course, I'm preaching every week on YouTube, and what else am I on? I'm on Facebook. I'm on. They've got me on Zoom teaching, and Facebook and YouTube again, and you can always reach us at what we do on all of these exchanges of media. You can always hit me up on Facebook. And, I'm out there, so I ain't hard to find. Sometimes I don't want to be found. People are finding me. But just remember that I'm tied to this place. This is my assignment, New Antioch Church, 2401, St. Paul Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 21218, 410-889-7040. And just whatever I can do to help, man. I'm trying to help. This is a helping time. And trying to be humble about it. I'm seeing that all the things that God has taken me through up to this point prepared me for such a time as this.
Well, again, thank you. We do appreciate your time. And as always, we end Breadcrumbs by saying, maximize your existence.
Ditto.